Have you ever known that you've got more potential, that a higher possibility exists inside you and not lived up to it? And maybe even felt frustrated, like, I know it's there, but how do I get it? How do I access it? And would you like to know how? And even better than know how, would you like to actually access it? So, in this video, in this true story, which includes me this very morning in tears, I will show you how to do that. I will tell you about the piece that's missing for most people here. Now, when I was in eighth grade in Northern Virginia, there was a big fight between Anton Munoz. Oh my goodness, I just remembered his last name. Anton Munoz and Frank. It was down at the south end of the big main hall by the glass doors, and it was, I guess, for me, the first time I'd been close to, like, a real knockdown, drag out fight, and I don't know what was going on with the school administrators that day, but they were nowhere to be seen, and this thing went on for, like, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I don't know, and it ended up that Anton beat Frank until he couldn't stand up. I remember Anton shouting, "You better stay down!" And of course, what I was doing was standing on the side watching all of it with my mouth hanging open, gawking as we tend to do. And what I didn't know then, what I learned out this morning, is I made a decision, albeit unconscious. I made a decision and created a belief that changed my life. Now, that very same school year, earlier in the year, I had refused to fight David Grohl. And yes, I do mean that David Grohl of Nirvana and Foo Fighters. He's a Foo Fighter, and we weren't destined to fight. We were supposed to fight. But that's another story for another time. The combination of these events, though, and see, what happened was I watched Frank, who I knew from judo. Actually, we went to the same judo school. He was a brown belt. When I watched Frank and Anton fighting and heard the other boys cheering and shouting, I realized, no, I didn't realize, actually, it was unconscious. The I'm not into fighting. I wasn't into fighting then. I'm not now. The narrative that's what we do, that's what boys especially do, that's how they become tough and strong and manly and acceptable and good. I was really strong. So my conclusion, again, albeit unconscious, was I'm not that. So what does this have to do with anything now? Well, I was just starting my judo life at that point, and despite me being a fat teenager and out of shape, eventually I got decent. And then in my 20s, I'd lost some weight and actually started winning competitions and eventually got my black belt. However, now, today, if I tell you how many years later, you'll be impressed that I'm still standing. No, I don't know. Whatever it is, 40 years later, this morning, I am in the midst of my self-creation process. What does that mean? Self-creation process. Okay, let's break it down. Super simple. Super, super simple. I go into depth in this other places. You and me and everyone, we have two selves. We have the part which Phil Stutz calls part X. Part X is lazy and doubtful and scared and selfish and complains, and you get the idea, right? And we all have access to part X. We all have access. Everybody does. We also all have what I call a supreme self, right? And that is you at your best, at your highest, full of love and courage and generosity and gratitude, right? That's you free of part X. And we all have both. We all have access to both. And of course, the quality of your life, what we create in our life, depends on which one we're living in. And Everything we want, everything we would love to create comes from living as our supreme self. So, what does that mean? Bottom line, a lot of people have heard, I'm guessing you've heard it before too. You create your own reality. Oh, that's exciting. And hmm, it can be a little depressing too if when we think about it, because what if there are things in our life that we don't like? I created that. So here's the thing, creating the supreme self, there's more to it than meets the eye. And this is it's not a secret. It's just, it's not often put forward because we want to simplify, or people tend to simplify. I don't even know why it's not put forward. It was missing for me for years. There's three components. One is defining who is the supreme self, right? Who we are at our best. And what I did and what I guide my clients to do is actually invest some time, write it down. We create a supreme self manifesto. A manifesto, it's a written set of thoughts, statements, declarations about who we are and who we are becoming, what we are creating ourselves to be. Now, cool, insufficient. Check this out. Have you, or do you know anybody, or even a company who has created a mission statement or a vision statement? Maybe put in some time and effort and days and hours and weeks and created something that's really like inspiring and uplifting. Like, yeah, this is who we are. Well, cool, sorta, except what happens then? Most of the time, what happens then is, technically speaking, diddly squat, right? Maybe the company or the person types it up or gets it graphically produced, frames it, puts it on the wall, or maybe it's in a drawer. And then 6 months later, who is that? What's on that statement? What is that vision? Right? We tend not to remember. Here's the rub of it, though. We we know it's possible, right? We imagined it, right? When Napoleon Hill said, whatever we can conceive, we can achieve. So if we could see it, imagine it, write it down, it's alive. Yet, if what we're living on a daily basis is disconnected from that, ooh, that ain't good. That's painful, right? Just literally painful. Because, and especially painful because now we know that that's possible. We know that that exists across time and space. So, the second component of creating our supreme self, right? Yeah, define it, write it down. That's good. Make a manifesto. Yes. And yours is different than mine. Everybody's is unique, right? We all have our dharma and our ikigai. Write it down, create your manifesto. And number two component that's absolutely essential and often missing, activation and cultivation. Activation and cultivation means on a daily basis connecting to that, doing something with it, not just knowing it's there. What I do and what I guide my clients to do is every day use it. Use that manifesto, right? One of the things I speak every day, and I speak all of the declarations in my manifesto, I write also. One of the things I speak is I use this manifesto to create my supreme self now. Abracadabra. Abracadabra, what does it mean? From the ancient Aramaic, through speaking, I create. As I speak, I create. Now, so every day we have a process. It's the cornerstone, it's the essence. It's one of the first things in the day to create our supreme self. Why leave it up to chance? Because guess what? The part X, it's got a lot of momentum for most of us, right? We've got a lot of messages that confirm it. It's for a lot of us, it's habitual. So to live as the supreme self, to create that, takes some consistency, it takes some effort. So now, here it is for this morning. Let me open up a little bit and give you a deeper detail of this. This morning, here's one of my declarations. I am astounding authenticity, empty of exaggeration or need to impress. I am real. I'm astounding authenticity, empty of exaggeration or need to impress. I am real. And so, what happens for us when we speak or write, or sometimes even if we listen to, when we become aware of those declarations, who our supreme self is, just a component of that supreme self, then one of two things happen. We either get a response in our body, which is like, yeah, I am that. And maybe we collect some evidence like, yeah, you know what? Yesterday I did that. Last week I did that. And it gets stronger. The supreme self gets stronger. Or flip side, we go, I'm not that. Right. And then what happens? Well, in normal life, we just revert, we snap into our part X self. However, when we are in a conscious process, activation and cultivation, what happens instead? This is what happened for me this morning. I am astounding authenticity. Snap. Yesterday, in the middle of a conversation with one of my coaches, he was asking me about the results. And I said, oh, yeah, I got 3. And the truth is, in that moment, I really was pretty sure I got 2, not 3. So this morning, I snapped to that and I said, why did I do that? One, that's not empty of exaggeration or need to impress. That's not astounding authenticity. That's duplicitous. That's exaggeration. That was, and then I asked myself, well, why did I do that? Was I trying to impress him? Or was I trying to impress me to feel like I had more success than I actually had with that thing? So, and as I sat with it for a moment, I was like, gosh, I think it might have been both. So I said, well, why would I be trying to exaggerate and impress? And then, of course, the immediate response is because I don't think I'm enough. I don't think I'm good enough. Kind of an inescapable conclusion, right? So then I said, okay, well, there must be a self judgment. And here, y'all, we get into the third key of self creation. So, one is define who is the supreme self, create a manifesto. Two is activation and cultivation, a process. The third is let go of what's in the way. And here's the thing, y'all, for any of us, if we are moving toward consciously evolving, creating our highest self, which is forever, it's never going to stop. There's always more. We continue to evolve and grow. We're here to experience and create more freedom and love and vibrancy. That's who we are. So I realized in that moment, I had a need to impress because I don't feel good enough. And then I thought to myself, well, didn't I already forgive that? Yeah, I did. You know what? It came up again. Okay, going to a new level. I know enough now to say, okay, that's good, right? If I see that, I can free myself and then I, quote, vibrate higher. So, okay, well, what's the judgment? Feel into that for a minute. The judgment is I'm a loser, right? I had to, this is how it occurred for me yesterday. I have to create myself, exaggerate myself to be more of a winner. So, okay. So the judgment is I'm a loser. As soon as I experienced that, thought that, flash, boom, all the way back to 8th grade to being on the sidelines there of Frank and Anton's fight. I was like, oh, I wasn't in that fight. I'm not a boy who fights. I'm a loser. So then I do the process. So the process, super simple version, quick version, feel. I forgive myself for judging myself as a loser. Yeah, I can feel emotion come in this moment as I do it. And when I did it a few hours ago this morning, tears, sobs, whew, and as much as anything, it's like, wow, I was really hurting myself with that judgment. That hurt. So, and here's what happens, y'all, when we forgive, not just in our heads, but when we forgive in our hearts and our bodies, when we feel the pain and then also connect to the innocence, we didn't know any better, then something moves, something shifts, a space opens up, right? Because I've forgiven myself for judging myself as a loser before, but in this moment, a space opened up again. And in that space, there is possibility. And then we use a sentence stem that is for what's true is, or for what's even more true is, I am. And those, what comes then, what we create or comes to us as a gift, the words that follow that finish that sentence, those become the seeds of the manifesto, right? Because when we're freed up from this, right, and this is the reason in my book here, I chose this as the cover, which my daughter did the design for, right? It's because a hot air balloon, right, it goes up naturally, right? If it's got the whatever the right gas is in it, how does it stay down? It's tethered, right? It's tied to sandbags, to weight. So when we forgive ourselves, we cut the sandbags, we release the weight, and then we go up, naturally go up. So that's how it works. Self-creation is imagining our truest self. Yes, and a lot of people do that. Visualize, cool, that's great. Then they miss the activation and cultivation, the second part. And that is absolutely important and essential. And so many people don't do that. Yet at the same time, part of why they don't do that is because it's painful, right? Because to activate and cultivate means to confront, right? My coach, John Patrick Morgan, describes it as being like a psychological exfoliant, right? If we activate and work with that truest self, that vision of ourself, if we do that on a regular basis, that other stuff's going to come up and it doesn't feel good. Here's the great part though, y'all. It doesn't feel good for a moment, not long. So this morning, yeah, oh, I cried, I sobbed, but just for a couple moments. Right? And then I got to the other side of it and I'm freed up and I discover something new about who I really am and what I'm creating. This, my friend, is the art of self-creation. It's available to you. And I share this with you because you deserve it. And not only do you deserve to live as your supreme self, we want it. The world wants it. That's how we make a change. Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back next week for a regular show.